And that's the end of it. There's nothing else. Episode 8 of Season 2 / Episode 15 of Interview with the Vampire, in which the Coven gets its just desserts. Daniel Malloy and the Talamasca unveil some truths in a final twist to the now completed adaptation of Anne Rice's first book in the Vampire Chronicles series. Let's get into the breakdown, and then I'll go over my thoughts on the series as a whole. Here come the spoilers. In the aftermath of last episode's grueling trial, Louis remains confined in his death coffin, agonizing over what he could have done differently. But his wounds heal. In fact, they heal over the pebbles in his coffin, some of which are still embedded in his skin to this day, appearing like cancerous lumps in an X-ray. Meanwhile, Armand is punished, caring for the victims and disposing of them, being treated like a lesser vampire by the now Master Santiago. But he played the part, so he can arouse no suspicion, because he in fact swaps Louis' coffin while no one's looking, and feeds Louis his blood so he can fully recover. And so through the sewers, Louis escapes, finds a abandoned crypt, makes a little bit of a home for himself, and starts planning his revenge to burn down and kill the rest of the Coven. Armand tries to warn him, hey, you gotta get out of Paris. In his madness, Louis does not care, but he warns Armand to leave the theater when he enacts his plan. During the story time, by the way, Daniel is in communications with the Talamasca, showing off some excellent multitasking. He wants some evidence to better challenge the story Louis and Armand are weaving here and get to the real truth of the matter. I don't think it's made super clear what Daniel paid for this evidence. I suspect he agrees to some editorial oversight from Talamasca over his book, and that's how he gets this evidence. Let's get back to the fire. While everyone's sleeping in their coffin, he lights them all up with gasoline and fire. Their little mockery on Claudia's mirror here, twiddly diddly dead, reaffirms his actions, right? They have no respect for her or him at all. Here we see him grab Claudia's diaries. He makes sure to take care of any of the stragglers with a quick beheading. We get a pretty cinematic sequence of Louis' rampage here. It has like these film noir vibes to it with his narration. He's sneaking around with his trench coat. He rigs the motorcycles to kill Celeste and Estelle, who think it's the London Coven that's behind this. Santiago manages to escape through the sewers. I wish I had a clear view of exactly how he got out of the theater when he realized it was set aflame. But I think the point here is that he's very much only concerned about himself, though we get some great reactions from him here when he realizes Celeste and Estelle are gone. And then Louis makes contact telepathically, revealing himself to be the one behind this. Ben Daniels chews through the scenery real good here in this back and forth between Louis and Santiago. Santiago wants to take all the credit for killing Claudia. Louis is egging him on to come to him. He's really trying to rile up Santiago real good for his final performance, his final moment. He mocks him about his past and how his maker was embarrassed of him and the name he chose, Santiago. Louis rubs it in with a perfect impersonation of Santiago, echoing from several episodes ago the moment that Santiago mimics Louis. Filled with the lust for revenge, Louis is at the height of his power. He's mastered his gift of fire, lighting his own cigarette without a lighter even. Santiago takes the bait, flies out of the sewers to get his head cut off. It's brutal, it's visceral, it's exactly what Louis needed to satiate his vengeance. The jazz music, the montage editing, the dark eye lighting, the violence, it all plays out like a stylish Hollywood revenge thriller. Because of course this is a glamorized retelling of the events. As we've seen through the whole series, it's embellished from the perspective of the person telling it. And at this point, of course, it's Louis telling the story, influenced by Armand. And Daniel sees this for what it is, which is why he asked for this evidence that just arrived via Rashid, a mole for the Talamasca. Hidden between the pages of the New York Times is the script from the trial. which he'll bring up in due time. By the way, the headline in this newspaper does establish the date. This is taking place during the summer when Roe v. Wade was overturned. But before Daniel questions the narrative, Louis has to finish the story and get into the aftermath of the fire. So after the glorious violence, Louis and Armand have a little chat. Armand tries to explain himself. He wasn't sure that Louis' love would be long-lasting, so he sided with his coven of 200 years. But he's regretful and he's gonna spend his whole life making up for it. Though Louis doesn't think he'll ever make up for it. And how could he, for being involved in Claudia's death? But Louis still buys into Armand's remorse at this point, which is why he's still with him. It seems he does hold this mistake over Armand's head for the rest of the relationship. And if it wasn't for this dynamic, then maybe Louis wouldn't have been with Armand for so long. And Armand is certainly taking advantage of that to stay with Louis, because with the coven gone, he too has no one else. But what's really keeping Louis in this relationship is the thought that Armand at least cared enough to save Louis and was reluctant about the whole thing, is very regretful, as opposed to Lestat, who seemingly was just out for revenge and very hateful and took some pleasure in the performance and the death of Claudia. Seemingly. So he does want to know where Lestat is. He's still in Paris, hanging out in his old master's lair, reminiscing. Louis arrives with Armand in tow, apparently about to kill Lestat. He even shows off his new fire powers. He's in complete control of fire now. But Lestat says he cannot be so easily killed. He has the blood of Akasha. Akasha is a vampire that comes up in later books. You might have seen the Queen of the Damned movie with Aaliyah as Akasha. She is the mother of all vampires, very powerful. Louis has no idea about her at this point. At some point, it seems Lestat drank Akasha's blood. It's unclear. It's definitely a little bit of a tease for upcoming seasons. But Louis isn't here to kill Lestat the same way he killed the rest of the coven. He's going to put a stake through Lestat's heart by punishing him with loneliness. Louis utterly rejects Lestat right in front of him by embracing Armand and declaring him his one and only true love for the rest of time. Now that's some real torture for a romance story right there. Lestat's obviously hurt but too proud to divulge his true feelings. He laughs it off and suspects it won't last that long anyway. Armand and Lestat do exchange a glance that hides something. Something's going on here. But Louis does notice he's too self-satisfied. And so Armand and Louis travel the world and live happily ever after. Because that's the end of it. There's nothing else. But Daniel has some questions. He's got some lingering thoughts. Brings up some inconsistencies. How the vampire Sam seems to be at two places at once, guarding Armand, but then also helping to bury Louis alive. Just chalk it up as a mistake. Minor details, no biggie. Armand is getting angry though. What you getting at, Daniel? What are you trying to say? But then Daniel brings up that Lestat also has the power to control a lot of people at once. Like how he used his powers to mind control all those soldiers in season 1. So what if Lestat was the one who compelled the audience to say banishment instead of death, and thus saving Louis' life? He brings out the script by Sam for evidence, delivered by the Talamasca. There's a bunch of scribbles on the side, written by Armand, the director of the play. Though he said he was in the coffin, he wasn't rehearsing with them. He told Louis he had no control of the play, and yet he has all these notes in the margins, as if he was right there directing the rehearsals. So we get the reveal that yes, in fact, Armand was very much leading the play rehearsals. Lestat, in fact, was a lot more critical. He feels that Armand is underestimating Claudia's power. Armand believes the Coven will be able to control Claudia with their mind. But as we saw in last episode, she was a lot more defiant and able to withstand a lot of that mind control power. But then the big bombshell here is that it wasn't Armand at all who compelled the audience to change their sentence. Armand was very much prepared for Louis to die along with the rest. It was actually Lestat who used his powers to save Louis. forcing the audience to say banishment instead of death. Now, last episode I pointed out that perhaps he helped amplify Armand's mind control to save Louis, but I didn't consider that Mon did nothing at all and it was all just Lestat's doing. Really changes things drastically here. It's a 180 here. Tragic that Louis chose Armand all these years when it was in fact Lestat who saved his life. Those looks Lestat gave Louis on stage hold a lot more weight now. Armand tries to brush it off by saying, oh, those are just forged documents. That's not the real script. But we can see in Armand's reaction that Daniel truly uncovered something real here. Louis is convinced that Armand has lied to him for all these years. So they have a fight that ends the relationship. It's not as intense as the fight between Louis and Lestat, but it's still pretty bad. He warns Armand not to harm Daniel, as Daniel is Louis' ally in all this at this point now. So what do we understand now to be Armand's motivations here? So it appears that Armand is an opportunist. I do think he loves Louis and has always loved him, but it's a cowardly love, one that doesn't hold up when threatened by his coven. He didn't have the courage to fight for Louis, but when the opportunity presented itself in the form of Lestat saving Louis, he took credit for it and spent the rest of his relationship with Louis trying to make amends for it. But as Louis pointed out all those years ago, he's never been capable of doing so. And he's only been able to maintain this relationship through lies and manipulation and some mind control even. So what appeared to be true love at the beginning of the season actually turns out to be just another variation of toxic love. It's taken a third party like Daniel and Natalia Mosca to actually reveal these truths and get Louis to break up with Armand. And that's not to say Louis comes out of this a saint. He still holds on to the violence, using it to threaten and control Armand here. Louis thanks Daniel for revealing the truth, and then he burns the laptop like he burnt the tapes in the first season. Though I think this is just another dramatic gesture. Surely the recordings are saved in the cloud, and it doesn't really stop Daniel from publishing his book because he does write a bestseller. So we fast forward, Louis goes to visit New Orleans during an upcoming hurricane. He checks out this tour guide who brings up the incidents of season 1. So it includes a bunch of misinformation hearsay as if they were true, which just makes Louis laugh. And then he sees a young vampire hunting for rats, surely suspecting that he'll lead him to Lestat, which he does. And so we arrive at Lestat's decrepit home, where he's been miserable since Louis rejected him in Paris all those years ago. Lestat has certainly gone mad all these years in his loneliness, playing along to the music on a wooden plank as if it was a piano. How the great have fallen. This rendition of Alone Lestat feels more like a burnt out junkie than a decrepit husk played by Tom Cruise in the movie. I like it because we see Sam Reed's humanity come in through a little more. He's a lot less monstrous. And actually, this is the first time we see the true Lestat in a way, because every other moment has been filtered through the memories and the storytelling of Louis and Armand. He's certainly not at his best here, but it feels authentic. So Louis is here to make amends and get some closure. Louis starts by asking Lestat if he saved him in Paris, to which Lestat confirms, saying that he didn't reveal it at the time because he doesn't like to point out his virtues and thought Louis would figure it out eventually. Also at that point, Lestat saw that Louis was very much in love with Armand, so Lestat didn't want to ruin that for Louis. He wanted him to be happy because Lestat loves Louis. And so he accepted that he wasn't going to be with Louis. And so they get real emotional as they start revealing all these regrets they've had over all these long years. He actually thanks Lestat for the vampire gift, saying that he used to wear it like a curse, that was selfish and petty and made him suffer because he was suffering. Louis regrets how he treated Lestat. Lestat regrets how he treated Claudia. And Louis was on Lestat's mind this whole time, worried about his well-being. He brings up the moment where Louis almost killed himself in San Francisco when Armand called him. And what led Louis to these suicidal thoughts was the death of Claudia, was her absence. And Lestat admits that he too can't keep Claudia out of her mind. They both share this loss. Louis admits that he's as much to blame for turning Claudia into a vampire. Lestat recounts her final moments as she looked upon him like a child. Here we have two grieving fathers who at long last are able to have this emotional release. And so they exchange a few more words in the midst of the hurricane, which we are not made privy to, but we can gather that although the grief of Claudia will linger in their minds, they can now move on with their lives. And probably separately, this is not a scene of them getting back together. This is a scene of closure. I don't think it's meant to excuse the toxic romance here, but it is to show that they've grown, you know? And it's also a cathartic experience for Anne Rice, the writer of the story. This book was a sort of therapy for her after the loss of her own daughter. It really works as a poignant conclusion to this series, and specifically to the Louis and Lestat relationship. Okay, so now we flash forward to the present, I believe. Daniel has published his book, and he's on TV to promote it, where the host feels like Daniel has lessened himself and ruined his career by publishing a book about vampires. The host thinks that this must be just a joke book, but Daniel insists it's real. And his personality here does feel a little bit changed, right? He does have like a rock star swagger to him. He's book successful, he's rich now, so maybe that has something to do with it. But soon enough we get the reason why there's so much pep in his step. Back in Dubai, Louis is a bachelor once more, having the penthouse all to himself, but he's listening in to the vampire telepathic chat room, where it seems like all the vampires are out to get him. They despise him for revealing the secrets in that book that Daniel wrote. They want him dead. He doesn't seem fazed at all by it. And then Daniel calls in, wondering why Louis isn't getting the royalty checks for his book. I guess Louis doesn't really care so much about the money, he's already rich. Daniel suggests writing another book, this time without the Talamasca butting in, but Louis doesn't want that. And this is when Daniel drops a charade of talking on the phone and reveals to be a vampire himself. That's right. And his eyes change to Armand's eye color, it looks like. Is eye color dependent on your makers? I thought Claudia's eyes weren't blue. Lestat's eyes are blue, and I don't know. And I guess vampires have the power to change their eye color from what they used to be to their new eyes. But yeah, the reason why Daniel's acting like a rock star now is because he's a vampire and seemingly got turned by Armand after Louis left him with him in 2022. Or maybe at some point after. Now, why did Armand choose to turn Daniel into a vampire? He was told by Louis not to harm him, so maybe Armand lashed out at Daniel in anger for revealing the truth, and then had to make him a vampire so he wouldn't bleed out. Or maybe Armand did it to stay in Louis' life. Maybe he feels he can have some connection via Daniel, also making Daniel vampire is a way to get back at Louis. Maybe making Daniel an immortal to show Louis that Daniel is not that great of a person, knowing that Daniel pester and annoy Louis about making new books. Armand could also be fulfilling the idea Louis had back in the 70s of keeping Daniel around as a memory of their relationship together. Maybe there's more to it that will be revealed in later seasons, because it has been confirmed that there will be a third season, and it looks like all this here is setting up future stories. There's still plenty of books to adapt. So we end with Louis going to his little meditation area. He digs his feet in the rocky sand, maybe a way to remember his time in the coffin. He also has the dress of Claudia in the background, a picture of his brother on the wall. It looks like he's reached a moment of clarity. He doesn't want to escape his past, as all those memories make him who he is today. And so he sends out a message telepathically to all the vampires listening that he's not afraid of them. His doors are unlocked, his windows are unlocked. He's basically inviting them to take him out if they have the courage, without the burden of his toxic lovers, and having more time to grapple with the truth. He's reached a sort of state of nirvana. He wants to establish a new paradigm or something where vampires are no longer in hiding. But is he a bit full of himself? He says he owns the night, as if no vampire out there can touch him. So my thinking that in releasing his story to the world through Daniel's book, he wants to inspire other vampires to stop living in secrecy and challenge the old ways. That way horrible things like Claudia's death won't happen ever again. but he may be taking on more than he can handle here. Right now, most people don't believe vampires to be real. They think his story is fake, of course. But it seems like the series is setting up a moment where more vampires are going to reveal themselves. Some in support of Louis, but a lot others who are against him. It could be that the Talamasca want Louis to make himself vulnerable like this. They fear that he could be this revolutionary vampire figure that would be detrimental to society. And so they want all these vampires to go out and kill him. And so that's why they helped with the book release. You know, there's a number of possibilities. We'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. I'm sure book readers can point out some clues here and there of where the series is going. But as we've seen in these 2 seasons, they've made a lot of changes, a lot of adjustments. And again, this is being adapted for modern times, right? These books came out decades ago, so I imagine there's going to be more twists and turns we won't see coming. So yeah, I'm hoping they follow the books and rename next season The Vampire Lestat, and then like the following one, The Queen of the Damned. But I wouldn't be surprised if they just kept the same title, you know, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5. All the marketing people at AMC probably like that idea better, I imagine. But as for Part 1 and Part 2 of Interview with the Vampire as a whole, now that we've seen it all, I'm grateful that it's been adapted to this extent, you know, 15 full episodes. You know, there's pros and cons to make it in a TV series. The movie has some more cinematic flair to it. You know, sometimes the show feels small in comparison, but the breadth of the series allows for so much more nuance, and we really get to dig deep into all these characters, their motivations, their emotional states. It did a great job of modernizing the story too, you know, and making Louis and Claudia Black wasn't just a frivolous addition. And now it's hard for me to think about Louis as any other person but Jacob Anderson, and the same goes with Sam Reed's Lestat. His Lestat has superseded Tom Cruise's version tenfold, and although it is hard to top Kirsten Dunst's Claudia, both Bailey and Delaney really made Claudia their own in this adaptation. Particularly Delaney, I think, did a really good job of filling this older Claudia with so much more gravitas. And Assad Saman's Armand really surprised me this season. Like at the beginning of this season, I was really skeptical of Armand, and it really felt like he was up to something. But then as the season went on, Assad's performance just really won me over. And then at the end, I was like almost completely under Armand's spell. And it felt like, oh yeah, maybe Armand and Louis are going to have a happy ending here. And then that twist came in the end, and then just reminded me, oh yeah, this is a more complex story. All these characters are messy. And I did appreciate just the narrative structure of the series, and how it played with memory, how it switched between perspectives. It was fun to see the melodrama on stage and off stage. The romance, of course. It wasn't all perfect. I think AMC filmed a little bit with the technical aspect. You know, the AMC Plus versions were edited. They're probably going to release the uncut version later. Although it seems like the later half of the season, there wasn't much differences between the versions. But some of the editing was abrupt between the commercial breaks and all that stuff. Sometimes the Daniel Malloy character felt a little bit grating, felt a little bit overwritten. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Can't think of a better vampire drama out there right now. And that's it. I guess we're just gonna have to wait a couple more years for more. Though they are making more of that Mayfair Witches show, and they're gonna make a new Telemasca show. That could be a cool X-Files type of thing, maybe. But apparently they are going to put Interview with a Vampire on Netflix, so it should get a bigger audience. That usually bodes well for series, so hopefully that'll be a success, and maybe they'll put even more money into it, and the series is going to keep getting better and better and better. I'm most excited to see Akasha. I want to see what they do with that. That's going to be so fun. What did you think of the finale? What did you think of the whole series? Where do you want them to go next? Let me know in the comments. As for now, I gotta get going. I'll see you next time. Under the moonlight. Bye bye.